You know, when we think of humanity's greatest inventions, we usually think of the wheel, or maybe fire. But what if I told you one of the most important inventions ever is something you probably check a dozen times a day without even thinking about it? Yep, we're talking about the calendar. And trust me, it's so much more than just a tool for scheduling appointments. It is literally the blueprint of civilization.
So, let me ask you a question that sounds really simple. Why is today today? I mean, why this specific date? The fact that we can all agree on what day it is all around the world, well, that's not an accident. It's the result of a story that's thousands of years in the making.
You see, the calendar wasn't just invented to count days. It was a revolutionary piece of technology designed to solve three of the biggest problems we've ever faced. How do we survive? How do we build a society? And how do we find our place in the universe? Let's dig into each one. First up, let's talk about the most basic human need of all, survival. I mean, before you can build pyramids or write poetry, you've got to eat. And with the invention of agriculture, humanity was suddenly faced with a massive life-or-death problem. When do you plant your crops, and when do you harvest them? If you get that timing wrong, people starve. It's that simple.
So what was the answer? The calendar. It was the world's very first agricultural guidebook. Think about it. In Egypt, it was all about tracking the floods of the Nile. In Mesopotamia, it organized the entire cycle of growing wheat. And in China, it was absolutely critical for planting rice at just the right moment. This wasn't just a convenience, it was humanity's first and most important piece of agricultural tech.
And you can actually see this technology getting better over time. Early on, you'd see simple rules in Chinese texts, something like, plant your rice 110 days after the winter solstice. Okay, helpful. But then later you get this incredibly sophisticated advice with best, second best, and last chance planting windows. That kind of precision, that leads to bigger harvests and a much more stable food supply for everyone.
And this obsession with getting it right wasn't just happening in one place. It was a global race for accuracy. The ancient Egyptians got incredibly close with their 365-day year. Then Julius Caesar's Julian calendar got even better by adding a leap day every 4 years. But here's the amazing part. In 1281, a Chinese calendar, the Shoshi calendar, calculated the length of the year to 365.2425 days. That is just as accurate as the Gregorian calendar we use today, but it was created 300 years earlier. It's a stunning achievement.
Okay, so you've solved the food problem. You can reliably feed your people. Great. Now you have a whole new challenge. How do you organize all of them? This is where the calendar really transforms. From just a simple farming tool into the very blueprint for society itself.
In ancient China, there was this really powerful concept called zhengshuo. This was the official, state-sanctioned calendar handed down by the emperor. To control the calendar, to literally be the one who tells everyone what day it is, was to control the state. It was this profound symbol that brought the entire empire together, all marching to the same rhythm.
This line from the ancient Book of Rites really drives the point home. Announcing the calendar was one of the most important duties of a ruler. In fact, whenever a new dynasty took over, one of the very first things they did was issue a new calendar. It was a powerful way of saying, there's a new order now.
But this whole idea of organizing society through time wasn't just a top-down thing. The calendar created the rhythm of our daily lives through the week. And, the 7-day week wasn't always the standard. The Romans had an 8-day cycle for their markets. The Egyptians used a 10-day cycle. The 7-day week that we all know and use today, that actually comes from the ancient Jewish tradition of the Sabbath. Each of these systems gave structure to life, a time for work, a time for trade, and a time for rest.
So the calendar fed us, and it organized us, but it also did something deeper, something that speaks to a fundamental human need, the need to find meaning, to feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. And this is where the calendar stops being just a tool and becomes something sacred. You have to remember, in much of the ancient world, there was basically no difference between an astronomer and a priest. Studying the stars and planets wasn't just science, it was a holy act. The calendar was seen as this divine blueprint, a sacred bridge connecting the perfect, predictable cycles of the heavens with our chaotic, messy lives down here on Earth.
Nobody took this idea further than the Maya. Their system is just breathtaking. They didn't just have one calendar, they had several, all interlocking and working together. They had the 365-day Hab for practical things like farming, but running right alongside it was the 260-day Dzulkian, a sacred calendar that was used to time religious ceremonies and even make prophecies.
And if that wasn't enough, they also had what we called the long count.
This was a system designed to track enormous spans of time, to map out their entire history within a grand cosmic framework. They even had a unit of time called a Bacton, which was nearly 400 years long. The sheer scale of that thinking is just incredible.
And this deep link between time and ritual was everywhere you looked. The Maya would hold this huge new fire ceremony every 52 years, at the exact moment their two main calendars lined up perfectly. The Aztec calendar pinpointed the sacred days for human sacrifice to keep the cosmos in balance. And in China, the emperor himself performed rituals on the solstices and equinoxes to maintain harmony between heaven and earth.
So, after this whole journey, we have to ask, what does it all mean for us today? In our world of smartphones and atomic clocks, does this ancient invention even matter anymore?
I think the best way to understand it is this. The calendar was humanity's first and most important operating system. It was the fundamental code that ran the core applications of every successful civilization: agriculture for survival, government for order, and faith for meaning. It's a technology that was so successful, so foundational, that today we barely even notice it's there.
And make no mistake, the legacy of this ancient code is still with us. China's system of 24 solar terms, which is basically an ancient agricultural calendar that maps the year to natural events, is considered so culturally important that UNESCO has recognized it as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. This isn't just dusty old history, it's living wisdom.
So, the ancients gave us this incredible gift, a shared framework of time. It's the foundation our entire global society is built on. They used it to solve their biggest problems. And now, it's our turn. So the final question is, on this foundation of time that they built, what future will we choose to carve?